I've been listening to a lot of your stuff. You are clearly an exceptionally talented person in terms of production and performance and songwriting. You've got the full stuff, and obviously the British public agrees because your new album's number 4 in the charts, isn't it?
It was briefly, yes.
Yeah. Which is not to be sneezed at. And your previous album was number 3. I'm not being a big follower of your career. I'd be lying if I was, because obviously you are ploughing such an incredibly unique furrow that you must have an enormously loyal fan base.
I do, and I think that one of the things about being the kind of musician that I am and coming from the kind of tradition I came from, which was kind of classic conceptual rock music, whatever you want to call it, is that because it's been pretty much invisible in mainstream pop culture since punk rock came along in the late 70s, that music kind of disappeared and became, obviously for a while, very unfashionable. But there was always a very loyal fan base for it, all the way through the 80s, 90s, and 21st century. And I kind of found my way to those people, by releasing records on small independent record labels and building up a following in a very old-fashioned way. And they've stuck with me through thick and thin, because God knows I pushed them around a lot, because, I changed direction many times in my career. And this new record, for example, Future Bites, is much more electronic. It's much more accessible. It has very little guitar in it, very little of what you might call, say, the sort of classic rock tropes. And still, people have bought it and been very enthusiastic about it. So, I've been very grateful for my fan base being prepared to go with me on this sort of career-long journey into different musical styles and genres.
I need to tell you a story about prog rock, and because obviously I grew up. My formative years were the 70s, and my tastes were extremely eclectic in the 70s. From obviously Roxy music was a massive influence, and Bowie, and all that journey. But also, I was a massive prog rock fan,
right?
And it's something that kind of gets buried a little bit in the history of stuff, because kind of punk came along and it was deemed to be dinosaur rock, which is a load of old bollocks, really. And so I was an enormous Van de Graaff Generator fan.
Oh, yeah.
An enormous King Crimson fan. I know people laugh at me for it, but I loved ELP. I was a fan of... I thought it was a bit, the subject matters were a bit specious at times. Tarkus, for instance. But the music and King Crimson, I'm sorry, I've talked to some people from that period who were involved in that world, and they all say the same thing, that when King Crimson started and their continuing journey, it made them want to give up, because they thought they were the kind of gold standard of not everybody agrees, but I'm just saying from the point of view of the people I've talked to about it, they thought, God, this is a really different direction. And because like just before that was the Moody Blues, for instance, which was much more trad, albeit nice, and I like a bit of Mellotron like everyone else. But and then of course, people like Alan Parsons, who you've met no doubt through Simon, and I've spent quite a lot of time with, and to trash all that and put it in the bin because this new thing's come along is utter arrant nonsense. So in fact, our first 2 Human League albums were deliberately like conceptual rock albums, really. They could have fitted in some kind of Venn diagram way into almost like prog rock, some of it,
I've always felt that's true. The funny thing is, I grew up in the 80s, and I didn't grow up in the 70s.
No.
I went back and I found that music. But the music I grew up with was the music you and your contemporaries were making.
Yeah.
And I love that too. I grew up with bands like Talk Tears for Fears, OMD,
Yeah.
You guys, that was the music I was sort of, hearing about at school and I was listening to. But I also went back and found this previous generation of music that my dad was listening to. My dad had Dark Side of the Moon and he had Tubular Bells, and discovered that whole previous era of conceptual rock, which, as you say, at the time had been almost completely swept under the carpet I don't think by the musicians, by the media, by the music press, by the Paul Morleys and and those kind of people, because it didn't fit in with their idea of a year zero and all that stuff, Yeah. And obviously, there's been so many stories over the years about John Lydon admitting he was a massive Peter Hamill fan. And
that's right.
And then you hear others, like Ian. There's the Deborah Curtis book, Touching It. I think Touching It at Distance is how it's called. The one that the Joy Division film was based on. Anyway, there's a little. I've got a copy of it. There's a little photo supplement in the middle of that book, and there's a picture of Ian standing in his back garden, wearing a T-shirt. This must be about 1976, 1977. Wearing a T-shirt of Nectar. Do you remember Nectar?
Oh yeah, I do. Yeah.
I mean, they were like a C-list progressive rock. But I don't mean that in terms of their ability, but in terms of their sort of profile.
Yeah.
They weren't even one of the high flyers. They were real cult, And here he is standing, the great alternative post-punk icon, Ian Curtis, wearing a Nectar T-shirt, Yeah. And it's amazing how often those things, I hear those kind of things these days.
Well, I grew up, as you know, in Sheffield, and we used to go and see. There was only really one major venue in town. There was the Students' Union and everything, but in terms of big kind of shows, there was only the City Hall. And so we saw them all. We saw King Crimson at their peak. We saw Van der Graaf Generator. I saw even saw the Nice, and stuff like that. But there are some bands, and this is all kind of pulled into focus for me during the making of this podcast. There are some bands who transcend those timelines that don't conveniently fit into his. Hold on a second. For some reason, my wife is asking to enter the room.
Okay.
That's not right. Hold on a sec. That's not right. It's because I've sent her an invite for Mother's Day and she's got it wrong. That's right. That's funny. Oh dear. Well, yeah. Anyway, but bands like, for instance, I was talking to Jerry Casale from Devo, and I'm hoping to speak to Russ and Ron Mail from Spark.
Oh right, cool.
And they are bands that started in a few years earlier than the transitional phase, if you like, for new wave or whatever you want to call it. And I find that really interesting because and also I was talking to Gary Newman, and he they started out as a kind of like rocky pub punk band, and then they went to a studio to record, and there was a Moog there, and he literally had this epiphanal moment where he played it one note and he said, "This is what we're going to do. This is the future," right? And so I think I admire the fact. It's interesting that you've gone back into that period to examine that, because it's rich inspiration, rich.
Yeah, and very, deeply experimental music and very radical. A lot of it was really extraordinarily innovative. I mean, a lot of it had issues with, some of it I listen back to and I can see it's pretty tasteless, some of it, but the good stuff is as radical and as scorched earth as anything punk or post-punk or any of the hip music subsequently is produced, I think you're right. I think there's some things that transcend. Fripp seems to have somehow transcended the whole tarring with the same brush. I think largely through his association with people like Eno and Bowie and Blondie. That kind of gave him a free pass in a way. But Crimson have definitely come out of the other end of it, I think, with their integrity. In fact, Floyd, of course, always transcended. Yeah, because you couldn't help but like Pink Floyd. I mean, it was just it was like the Beatles. It was just fantastic music, and it was relatively simple. It didn't have. I think that's why bands like ELP maybe haven't come out of it so well, because ELP was always more about the technical musicianship, or at least that was a big component of it. And that was never the case with Floyd.
No. Are you a fan of Bob Fripp?
Yeah, very much so. I've worked with Robert on many, I've remixed all the King Crimson albums into surround sound.
Have you? Okay.
Yeah. I'm just working on his first solo album, Exposure, at the moment as well.
Wow. I love Bob, I think. And I saw in the, oh God, it was ages and ages ago, I saw him performing at some, in the foyer,
oh yeah.
Royal Festival Hall when he did the Electronics thing.
Yeah.
And that blew my mind completely. I thought it was magnificent. And he's such a lovely kind of down-to-earth guy, and he's become another superstar because of his mad wife, hasn't he?
He's a true, you say he's down-to-earth, and he is. I know what you mean by that. But he's a natural eccentric. He's a natural eccentric who just certainly doesn't think about music in the same way that most people would think about music. I mean, even his whole musical vocabulary, the choice of notes, was very unconventional. It was about as far away from that kind of pentatonic blues scale soloing that you could possibly imagine.
Yes,
which of course is why he endeared himself so much to the sort of post-punks and the more angular sort of music that was coming out of the late 70s, early 80s. Fripp, just was right a part of that scene. I mean, the whole. I mean, Robert Fripp sounds, closer to someone like John McGeoch from Magazine.
Yeah, who I love.
Than he does to Steve Howe from Yes. I mean, much closer. So I think that kind of, again, gave him that kind of longevity and immortality that perhaps some of those other musicians didn't have. And I think the same with Van der Graaf. There's a kind of heart of darkness about Van der Graaf.
No, it's telling me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say the thing for me about Robert Fripp is his stuff was as much about texture and obviously unusual scales and some would say a jazzy kind of thing, but in the best possible sense. But the truth of the matter is he was also a master of kind of soundscaping with guitar and using his guitar, and still is using his guitar as almost like a synth, really.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that came from influence from his buddy Brian.
Really?
Because they made that record in 1972.
Oh, Porcupine. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that kind of opened up that whole world for Robert, working with the Revox tape machines, which was Brian's thing, but then seeing how that could apply to guitar. But you're absolutely right. I mean, he totally took it on board and created his own kind of whole musical universe.
Yeah.
And and I think you're right. It was never about, although he is a brilliant player.
Yeah.
It's never about technique the way it perhaps was for some of the other musicians of that generation.
Yeah. There's never any kind of, firework style solos. It's all about melody and texture.
Yeah.
I mean, there's that do 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 from Red. Is it Red?
Yeah, Starless. Yeah.
Oh,
the album.
That is one of the most beautiful melodies.
Yeah, it's
incredible. I mean, I go back to listen to that. It's all ruined a bit by, kind of Greg Lake or whatever. But
I mean, he was a very lyrical player. I think you're right, and he kind of had it all. Really, he kind of had it all. He had that kind of violence and inner darkness, but he also had that incredibly lyrical sort of side to it.
I always felt it sounded kind of sci-fi. Everything he did sounded sci-fi. And I know there's a thing about all the guitar lines he did on Heroes, which is essentially his sound, right?
Yeah.
A lot of that backing track is him. And he never really quite got the credit he deserved for that,
How he didn't. He'll remind you
wrong.
He will remind you of that fact, yeah. Should have had a credit on Heroes, yeah.
So are you friends with Brian as well?
No, I never met Brian. I mean,
so the only going to be interviewing hopefully is for this.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be amazing. The only reason I kind of got to know Robert really well was because I ended up remixing the whole back catalogue into surround sound, and so, kind of met him as a contemporary and as a peer and worked on his catalogue with him. But I've never been the sort of person that went out seeking people, but
Yeah.
I'd love to meet, I mean, what a legend. You friends with him?
I've met him several times in the past. He's come to see some of my immersive sound events and stuff, which we need to talk about, by the way. So you probably know that I've got a company that does ambisonic.
I didn't actually, but I clicked on your links in your email to see what these different things were, and I saw there was something about. So I figured we would probably end up talking about it. As though we're both interested in a similar kind of this area of sound.
So we have a proprietary piece of software called 3D Audioscape, which enables us to create adaptable soundscapes to any given size, indoor or outdoor, for whatever reason. And we've done a huge number of projects in the last 20 years. I started the company Illustrious with Vince Clarke in 2000, and we've done, ridiculous amount of stuff. And that became, strangely enough, my main source of income for 20 years, and my main kind of competence. So anyway, the reason I mention it, obviously, is because you've done loads of 5.1 mixing, and this is something you're very interested in. I've done some consulting with Dolby regarding their Atmos system. And they freely told us when we went to their secret research establishment down outside London, they said to us, when we compared the two processing systems, they freely admitted that ours sounded better. So, which is interesting. But I think they just wanted to check out any potential opposition or whether they needed to buy us. And I said, well, there's no, they knew we weren't a threat because we weren't not really a commercial entity. It's more like a kind of, the analogy would be like an architectural practice is what we're like in sound, So we spent 20 years learning the uses and what works and what doesn't in terms of sound production in 3 dimensions. And that expertise, there are lots of systems that allow you to create immersive sound. Now there's Dolby Atmos and there's various other ones in Germany and Switzerland and what have you. And there are actually ones that just work on Max MSP that people have built in their own studios and all that stuff. But what you can't, what they can't buy is the expertise of knowing how to use it. It's like you can teach some of the rules of chess in 10 minutes, obviously, but it takes a lifetime to learn it. So anyway, to cut a long story short, and I'm sure this is fascinating for our lay listeners, to cut a long story short, it might be worth us talking at some future date about working together on and letting you hear our system, because I'm literally here, King's Cross, just down the road from you. Come down and see it in action if you want, when everything opens up. Or even if not, I'm in here on my own at the moment. It's perfectly safe. Yeah. Anyway, let's move on from that. What's your thoughts about surround sound?
Well, I think it's very hard for me to imagine any musician hearing their music in 5.1 or Dolby Atmos and not loving it. I don't get that. Some people say, well, I don't like my music in surround. So, well, you haven't heard it done properly then. Yeah. Somebody must have mixed it badly, because if it's done sympathetically, it's incredible. Why would you not want to sit inside the music if you could?
Exactly.
So I've worked with a lot of people over the years, and very often the artist, I found as a rule, the artist is initially very cagey about it. But if I can get them along, and this was the same with Robert as well, if I can get them along and sit them down in my studio and play them their own music in surround sound, they will love it. And almost without exception, that is what's happened. It happened with Robert, it happened with Andy Partridge from XTC, it happened with Roland with Tears for Fears. As long as I could get them into my room and say, this is what your music sounds like in surround, isn't it amazing? And they all fell in love with it.
Exactly.
So I adore it, and I've now moved. This studio I'm sitting in right now, I've had specifically built with Dolby Atmos in mind.
Right.
I've got 7.1.4. I've got 4 speakers in the scene, which you can't see, but And I'm now getting into that world, and it's just, I mean, it's just a joy to sit here working on these classic records and being able to reimagine them in a kind of three-dimensional space. I mean, I defy anyone to not be blown away by that.
Yeah. I mean, I did a project with, a while back, a friend of mine contacted me who's also a producer, and he said, you know, it was just in the period in the late, in the early 2000s when it was obvious that there was a period, say 5 years before that, where a lot of labels were doing insurance mixes of 5.1. You know, like they did knock out a quick 5.1 mix at the end, just in case it became a popular format. They were trying to roll out, DTS were trying to roll out DVD audio, and it looked like it might grow into like a domestic thing, which obviously Dolby are hoping Atmos is going to be. So, but it didn't. And I found that very interesting. And it's because basically, it's not because the equipment was expensive for domestic use. It's just people didn't want all the wires and the speakers around unless they had a listening room. So obviously, this is the problem. So going back a bit, they did a lot of producers did 5.1 mixers because they were in a 5.1 equipped studio, and they just did it as an extra mix at the end. All these mixers for years just sat gathering dust. So I went to my friend and said, why don't we go to all these major companies, because I've got contacts in all of them, I'm sure you have as well, and say, look, you're getting no commercial value out of these mixers. Why don't you let us put together one central online space where all this stuff can be aggregated? You give us the right to distribute these things. You take whatever percentage you want of it, and we'll take a percentage of it as well, and we'll make this big platform. And so I registered a name, which I've still got, called spatialized.com. And the idea was to do this, and we went quite a long way down with EMI in particular to get this done. They gave us Avalon by Roxy Music to spatialize, which is a beautiful sound. Sounds amazing in 5.1. And in the end, I just couldn't convince all of them to do it. You know, it's a bit like you have to, you know, I just couldn't convince them that it was worth bothering about. Because pretty bluntly, a lot of the people at the top of these companies now are not really music people. They are more concerned with the marketing of it. And they couldn't see the marketing benefit of it. They said, oh, it's going to take years to break this. And I'm going, well, it'll take a while to grow. I still think it's a good idea, by the way.
It's a great idea because you're right. I know for a fact that what you're saying is absolutely true, that there are many, many multi-channel mixes, not only 5.1, even going back to 70s and 80s, chord mix.
Electronic, yeah. And Pink Floyd.
Yeah. But a lot of which never actually came out. As you say, they were done kind of as insurance in case the technology did take off, and it did.
Exactly. So maybe we could start evangelize. Maybe I should get it back together and
because you know what, that market is beginning to. I mean, as I'm sure you know, I feel that market is beginning incrementally, but it is beginning to grow, and particularly when the Beatles started doing Atmos mixes, and you know, when the Beatles are doing something, that there's something happening in the marketplace. So I think those things are a great sign. The more catalogs out there, the more people are going to invest in the equipment to listen to. That's what I've felt. If your favorite album comes out in 5.1 or Dolby Atmos, it might be enough for you to think, you know what? I love that record so much. I want to hear it in surround. I'm going to go invest in a surround.
Exactly. I mean, it's like a bit of a catch-22, but the tipping point will come when there's enough people with the equipment at home. The irony is the actual equipment itself is not that more expensive than a good hi-fi.
No, it's the logistical side of wiring.
Yeah,
it's the one.
The clever thing that Atmos have been doing is the up-firing top ring of speakers.
Yes,
and the automatic configuration.
Yes, I think that's where Atmos might actually do better than 5.1 editors.
It sounds good.
Sound bars and all that stuff. Yeah,
it sounds good. Anyway, it's all a bit esoteric, but I'm sure, you know, there are geeks out there who are interested in this shit. It's all futuristic. Right, I want to talk about you now, because I think you're fucking amazing, frankly. So, I mean, are you comfortable with being called kind of new prog rock or
No.
what? How do you term yourself?
I term myself a musician and a producer and a writer, and I don't particularly like the idea. And listen, I know I'm not unusual in this. Most musicians will tell you the same, particularly ones that have been around for a few years. I don't like the idea that I am a generic artist.
Right.
Even though I recognize, I'm sure you have it too. You always get told you're synth pop or whatever, and you think, well, I've done all these other things too. You know, sometimes the preconceptions just stay with you throughout your career. And I do have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder about it because I've done so many different things. But the things I've done that have been the most successful have tended to come from the tradition of, see, I don't even use the word progressive. I say conceptual rock music. The idea of telling a story across a longer piece of music or a sequence of songs on an album that kind of have a flow to them, whatever, you know, however you want to characterize it. So I have never referred to myself as progressive rock artist. Other people have, and I understand why. Also, the fact that I've worked with a lot of other people from that tradition too, people like Roberts and Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull, neither of whom would also refer to themselves as progressive rock artists. Robert would loathe the term, I'm sure. And, you know, legitimately so. You know, when you look at his CV, why should he be pigeonholed as, you know, just in this one very specific narrow genre? So the answer to your question is no, I don't really identify with it. I like to think I have the freedom to do, you know, like I've just done a very electronic, accessible pop record, or an ambient record, or a noise record, or a metal record. I've done all these things over my career. But I do understand that for a lot of people, I come from that tradition of storytelling through an album.
Yeah.
And that is something that is most often associated with the world of quote unquote progressive rock.
I think that's very eloquently put. And I agree with you completely. It really bugs me. I mean, I've done, it's not worth going into. Everybody knows who listens to the podcast, the range of stuff that I've done. Okay, so the way I characterize what you do is you are clearly a master of production. I mean, I'm in my studio here listening to the Future Bites, the latest album, on some beautiful, you know, huge Bowers and Wilkins, you know, speakers. It's just, you know, a great place to be listening to things in my studio, to hear the detail, to hear the clarity of everything and the separation and the distance and the... I mean, you are a master of it, I have to say. Obviously I'm a producer as well. I know how skilled that is. And my thing, I teach here at Tileyard in London, a master's course in commercial music production and songwriting. And in a masterclass with you, they would probably learn more in a couple of hours than they'd learn throughout the rest of the course.
Well, I mean, sorry to interrupt you, I don't know if that's true, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm, you know, in many ways, I mean, listen, I'm very proud of the sonic excellence of the records I've made. I've spent a long time learning, largely through my mistakes, how to make better sounding records. And I think the new record, I'm really, really proud of the way it sounds. But I've really approached it like a bit of an idiot, and I don't really know what I do. I just know when it sounds good. Do you know what I mean? And
exactly what I do.
Yeah. Okay. So you're the same. Yeah. We're both kind of idiots.
I was never trained. I was never an engineer.
Me neither.
I'd learnt it through doing shit.
Well, my training was listening to records and aspiring to kind of create similar sounds. So listening to those early Floyd records and listening to Donna Summer, Giorgio Moroder records from the late 70s, or, you know, or Talk records or whatever it was in the 80s, and thinking, well, how can I make records that sound as good as that? And just by trial and error, I still couldn't tell you how a compressor really works, you know, but I know what buttons to press to make it do what I want it to do.
Oh, okay. Do you engineer all your stuff yourself? Or do you have...
Yeah. Well, I work with another guy on the Future Bias, a guy called David Costin, who's also a terrific producer and engineer. But I mean, I've learned so much also from doing I've learned so much from doing the remixing work as well, because trying to figure out how some of those sounds were made. And then you figure out, and then that kind of becomes part of my toolbox that I can use with my own music.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's really been a sort of, self-education in that sense, and arriving at this point where I kind of know what I'm looking for and I know how to get it. But if I had to actually articulate that to somebody else, students, I mean, listen, I'll have a go. If you want to invite me, I'll have a go.
I want to invite you, and I do think you should do it.
I'll try, but I just warn you in advance. I may struggle to really, explain exactly what it is.
It's not about technically explaining it. It's like knowing the process. That's all.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, they would be very inspired by the fact that you would even say, maybe I can't explain it. Yeah, because they get a lot of people giving them, a lot of other tutors maybe gives them a degree of certainty, like if you do this number of bars and you play this chord sequence, then you'll have a hit, for instance. That kind, and really basic stuff like that. What I'm trying to get them excited about is the thought process that goes into creating a beautiful piece of music. Some of it is about is understanding the tools that you're using, and that's a lifetime thing because it keeps evolving all the time. But a lot of it is just trusting your intuition based on your experience.
Completely. And that's the funny thing for me about mixing particularly, is why does two different people, can they mix the same song and one of them makes it sound absolutely astounding and beautiful and cinematic, and the other person makes it sound like a muddy pile of shit? And the answer is the second person is just not hearing it. They're not hearing the music. To me, it seems very natural to hear the music as it should sound in my head, and then the actual process of achieving that then just becomes an academic one. Okay,
Yes.
Well, do this now. It sounds like I imagine. So the second person just simply hasn't heard it in their head the way it should sound. They just go about it. They go about it in this kind of, well, I have to put a compressor on the bass drum because that's what people do. I have to put a reverb on the snare drum because that's what people do. But they're not really hearing it in their head. And I think, again, that's all down to listening a lot, particularly when you're a kid, listening to a lot of music, trying to understand what makes these records tick and what makes them sound good.
Exactly. I was saying, sorry, I've got a great story about exactly that point. When we were about to put when we were pleading with Virgin to put Temptation out as a thing. Seriously, they didn't want to put it out at all, which is bizarre. Anyway, so we said, Simon Draper, who's a very well-respected A&R man, head of A&R at Virgin at the time, and he said, I don't know, we're not really sure about it. And I'm going, are you sure? He said, we've got this new hot producer from America called Jeff Kirschenbaum, I think he was called, who'd just done Joe Jackson, and he was, like they all chat to each other and you go, this guy, we've got to use him. So I said, we're going to send it over to America. And I said, you don't need to do that. He sounds fucking amazing. We've done a really good job on it. Just put it out. No, we're going to send it to this guy in America. He came back, and it was exactly that. He'd missed the point of the record completely. Everything was confused and jittering, delays and reverbs in the wrong place, and the voices were all softened out like that American stuff they do, and it lost all its mojo completely. And he said, look, when he came back, we listened to it, we were horrified. He said, we will not promote this. B, we got on our knees and begged them to put the original mix out. Next thing you know, it's like number 2 in the charts, selling 20,000 a day. So it just shows the record company isn't always, well, A lot.
Well, they're rare. To be fair, I mean, you know, it's like that William Goldman quote about the movie industry. There's only one thing you need to know about the movie industry: no one knows anything.
Yeah.
And I really believe the same is true largely of the music industry. You know, it's funny. I'm working on this book at the moment, and there's one chapter in the book which is about. It's basically about the songs that were massive hits in the past that would never even get out of the starting gate now. Things like This Town Ain't Big Enough for the Both of Us.
Yes.
Virginia Plain.
Yeah.
Bohemian Rhapsody, you know.
Superman.
Superman, the poster child for
Yeah.
things that could never, ever be hit. They'd be laughed out of a playlist meeting.
Yeah. Shut up with your face.
Shut up your face, yeah. So, you know, this to me is what's tragic about the world of modern pop in a way, is that things have become so homogenized now that these kind of anomalies don't even get a chance anymore.
Well, they won't get played on the radio.
They won't get past a playlist meeting. They'll get focused groups out of oblivion, into oblivion. And part of the problem with that, of course, is that there's so much music now that radio stations and Spotify's and this world, they don't need to sort of dip into this quirky stuff. They've got all this, they've got so much of this generic stuff, this sort of musical balm. We don't need to play this weird shit anymore, do we? There's so much more.
Yeah.
And it's a shame in a way that these fantastic pop, you know, like your records, they wouldn't stand a chance now, I don't think, of even getting taken.
Interestingly, they would in America still. Yeah, because there's a different promotional infrastructure there. There are still there's a wide biodiversity of radio stations, for instance. So it'll get played somewhere, and you don't need to put it on. You don't need to get your record onto every single radio station like you do pretty much in the UK to get a big hit. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right about the whole homogenization thing. And they're also encouraged not to think for themselves. I've got another story which is horrifying. We did a collaboration with LaRue. You know the band LaRue, Ellie Jackson, and when they brought the first album out, it was hot because it sounded kind of like fresh and exciting and kind of 8-bitty and kind of and a little bit homemade, but really full of spirit and talent. And it did really well. It even did well in America. And anyway, so BBC Six were doing this series where they were encouraging contemporary artists to work with their influences from like maybe the previous generation. So she asked whether she's a big Hem 17 fan, so said, can we? So we did a thing at Maida Vale, recorded it there, visuals on the red button on the telly, yada, yada, yada. We all did it together. We did 3 of her songs, 3 of our songs. And it was just, and some cover versions. And it was just brilliant. It was the biggest music thing that had ever been on the red button. And she sang on a version of Temptation, right? Anyway, so the record company got really excited. Her record company said, oh, can we put this version out for LaRue? And I said, yeah, of course. So what we're going to call it? It'll be Temptation, and it'll be, LaRue versus Hem 17 or whatever. Great, we'll put it out. They went down to the pluggers at Radio 1. We got a phone call from them saying, would you mind if we just put this out under the name LaRue? And I said, yeah, I would fucking mind, frankly. It's our song and we're performing on it and Ellie's just singing on it. I said, well, fact of the matter is, they won't put it on the playlist if it's got the name Heaven 17. Yeah. Because we're not in the correct demographic. Yeah. We're older than 30. Yeah,
yeah. I've been going through this with my recent record. Yeah.
It's unbelievable. What are they thinking?
Yeah, it's very sad. And it's not, and I think the difference between now and then is that probably it was not completely dissimilar, but there was still the opportunity for maverick DJs to go against the grain. The story about Kenny Everett playing Bohemian Rhapsody 14 times in 2 days because nobody else on the station was playing it. And John Peel obviously was the reason that Oh Superman was it. those kind of scenarios can't really exist anymore. Of the sort of maverick DJ saying, well, fuck you, I don't care if this isn't playlisted, I love it and I'm going to play it. Those things don't. But you're absolutely right. People don't listen anymore. It's all about perception. I suppose the pop music business has always been a bit like that. I mean, we were talking earlier, weren't we, about how, punk kind of obliterated the progressive rock scene that had come before it. It was almost overnight. It was completely, you couldn't play it, you couldn't pretend to listen to it or like it. It was just overnight completely blacklisted.
In the UK, Germany, in Germany, for instance, they stayed very loyal to a lot of that.
I'm sure they did, but the bottom line is most of those bands were UK bands. So most of that scene was, that's the funny thing about America. I mean, British progressive rock is still very big in America. It still has a massive cult following. And it's strange because none of those bands were American. They were all British, apart from Zappa, if you include Zappa. Yeah. They're all British, maybe one Canadian band, Rush, but the rest of them were British.
That's right. It's true. Right. This is just flying by. So I want to talk to you about this is not like some commercial plug, but I really, really like your latest album. I think it's right. I mean, it's right up my street. And I've looked at a couple of the videos. They're interesting too. I like the deep fake face swapping one. That's really cool. For King Ghost, right? Is that it?
Self. That one. No, that one's Self. King Ghost.
Self.
Yeah. King Ghost. The animation. Yeah.
Yeah, the animation. Sorry, I got it the wrong way around. The animation is beautiful, by the way. I love it. Are they friends of yours, or how did you meet them?
She is, yeah. Jess Cope. She has a company called Owl House. She's made a few videos for me. She's a genius, but she's a bit like me in the sense that it's the amount of time it takes her to produce something that she has to be completely 100% about. She's completely obsessive about it. So I have to give her like 6 months ahead to come up with. I think she was working on that video for about 4 or 5 months. And it's all painstakingly done with stop motion animation.
That's really labor intensive. I know in a few videos like that we've done. Tell me about the philosophical background of the Future Bites. I mean, what's the central premise? I think
the whole idea of Future Bites originally was to try and two things. Firstly, is to talk about how social media has changed the behavior of the human species, how essentially we've been turned into a new generation of narcissists. I mean, we're all now self-obsessed because we see ourselves constantly reflected back from the mirror of social media. So the best way I can kind of encapsulate that is to say that there was a time when we used to look out at the stars with curiosity. Now we spend most of our time looking at our phones to see how many comments, thank yous, and likes we've got. Yeah. And that's a massive oversimplification, but I think broadly that is true. And that is what I've seen happen in my adult lifetime. And it's created a new kind of breed of self-obsession, narcissism. And the other side of it was that I wanted to parody the world of high concept, high design.
Right.
So the whole thing now, I mean, have you read about...
Not the thing, right?
Have you read about these NFT things?
Yes. Yeah, in fact, I'm doing research on it currently. A friend of mine, fintech company, and I'm asking him for advice on it at the moment. I like the idea because it's very J.G. Ballard, but...
Well, it's fascinating to me. It's this idea that now consumerism is all about ownership. It's not about utility at all. It's just about the status of owning something. Yeah. You can own something now which isn't even exclusive to you. It's not something you can even hold in your hands. You cannot even commercially exploit it, but at least you can say, I bought that and I own it. And that's consumerism taken to the most absurd extreme, isn't it?
It's like derivative trading, isn't it, in consumerism?
I suppose so. But yeah. You can't even exploit the thing you're buying now. So it's
right. So I've got a theory about this, and it fits in with NFTs perfectly. That people, for them to feel truly connected with an artist emotionally, they feel a very deep obligation to somehow support them in a difficult situation. They used to do that by buying a piece of physical, well, they still do, a piece of vinyl or a whatever cassette or whatever, you know. But obviously now where the perceived value of digital music is virtually zero, I mean, in financial terms, i.e. you can download it for nothing or listen to it for nothing, I think there's a vacuum there that people want to support the artist. I know, because I'm sure you do. I've talked to a lot of our fans. They want to support the artist, but they don't know how to do it. The only way they can think of doing it is, they'll spend 80 quid on a special edition of a multi-album set or something with special ingredients, and that's been monetized quite effectively. Mm-hmm. But the idea of actually owning a tiny share of the concept of an artist and being able to tell people that you're doing it.
Okay, Martin, but how does that work when you've got people, and I totally understand where you're coming from. That applies to our world. What about people who are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars buying a short clip from TV of their favorite sportsman scoring a goal or dunking a basketball or whatever? Because that's also happening. People are paying to own sporting moments or sporting events, the footage of. So that's not really supporting the sportsman, is it? And that's not like, I suppose in a way you're still buying into that person. You're buying into that cult of personality behind that particular sports person, aren't you? Mm. But it's not the same as supporting a musician or a painter or a digital artist by buying something they've put on the internet.
I think we're highly tribal people, and that's not going to go away. It's in our ancestral memory, in our DNA. So, we want to feel part of a tribe. I mean, I see it all the time we were very sniffy originally about performing on kind of multi-artist 80s festivals and shows, because at first we thought, oh, this is so cheesy, we're going to be on the same bill with, whatever. Yeah, we go with the friends of ours, but say, for the sake of argument, Bananarama or something like that, which were at the opposite end of the scale in terms of credibility as we perceived it. So I'm going, but then they grew so massively, and now they're huge. All the 80s festivals sell out, pretty much, all of them. And we're talking 10, 20,000, a lot of the outdoor ones. And people want to feel part of that tribe. Now, if they can do that at home, we often get questions of people going, we would like to make sure the money we're spending and the emotional investment that we're spending benefits the artist, because we don't want you to go away. Mm. So how do they do it now? Because if they give their 10 quid a month, like I do, to Spotify for Spotify Pro, you don't even need to do that. But if you do, that money doesn't get to the artist.
No, but you're waking up. Do you have a Bandcamp page, for example, for other stuff?
Yeah, we have a marketing thing on Music Glue and stuff like that. But no, we don't really sell. We sell vinyl direct to our fans.
Not live recordings and.
Yeah, I mean, we all do it on a project by project basis. We don't really have a coordinated thing. We have myself and Glenn have made a vow that we are not going to release anything digitally for the time being at all. Everything's in physical artifact form.
Okay. Which I love that, and I'm sure your fans love that too, because they're the generation. I mean, I'm part of that generation too. As I say, I grew up in the 80s. I'm the generation that still remembers the thrill, and I still get the thrill. You saw my record collection earlier. I still get the thrill of being able to hold something to my body.
Exactly.
This is something physical that I've invested in this artist, and it just doesn't. The concept of just downloading ones and zeros just doesn't do it for me.
Well, not even downloading, streaming.
Well, streaming ones and zeros just doesn't do it for me.
No, it doesn't do it for me either.
And this is why the NFT thing blows my mind, because it's even abstracted one more, step away even from that.
Well, Well, it's kind of a bit, almost like a version of the original Bowie Bonds thing that he got into. But obviously, this is much more, it's blockchain fundamentally. But anyway, let's get back to your album.
I'm still learning. It's
yeah. I'll
yes.
when I learn more about it, as I say, I'm talking to an expert in this, my friend Mike Wilson, if you're listening, Mike, because I know he does. He works in fintech.
My dad's name as well. It's a splendid name, Michael Wilson, my father.
Yeah, exactly. So, and he's the expert on these things. They've been around for a while, but they're just starting to catch fire now.
Yeah.
Anyway, The Future Bites. My favourite tracks. God, there's so many. King Ghost. Count of Unease. Self. Yeah, they're my three favourite. I like them all. I like it all. They've all got a different vibe. Are you going to go more down the are you going to stay on this route, or is this like just an outlier in your?
You froze on me for about 15 seconds there, Martin. You froze on me, so
I don't know what's going on. All right, I'll start. Can you hear me now?
I can see you now. I was on tender hook because you said my favourite tracks are, and then you focused on me. So you start from that point.
That's what I was thinking.
Right. That's silence. No.
Okay, my favourite tracks are Count of Unease, which I think is an amazing track. King Ghost, Self, Eminent Sleaze. They're my four favourite, but I love the entire album.
Okay. I thought you might say Personal Shopper because there's a little bit of a nod to Penthouse and Pavement.
Okay. No, I like all of them. And I like the concept of Personal Shopper.
Yeah. It's more the female vocals. Da, 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 da. Okay. It's
Can I just want to encourage the listeners, because we're starting to get quite a few listeners now, who are keen on the sort of stuff that the people I'm interviewing, that please listen to this album. I'm not doing it from a plug basis. I just think it's really good. So it's called The Future Bites by Stephen Wilson, of course. Please, you will love it. And I already want to go back to it and listen to it. It's the first time I listened to it all the way through today. So that's brilliant. I'm just looking at my notes because we must get to the end. We've been rabbiting on, haven't we? I love that, though. You've got a great voice, by the way.
Thank you.
And
very limited, but I do what I can with it. I mean,
I don't think it sounds limited at all. I think it sounds very authentic. So right with this, we do a kind of stupid. No, it's not stupid. A silly kind of smash hits type thing where I ask people their favourite X. So I'm just going to zip through these. It doesn't need any great level of explanation unless you want to. Just give me a title if you want. What's your favourite film?
The Elephant Man.
The Elephant Man. Great. Yeah. Love that film. Favourite book?
Favourite book? Probably Julian Cope's autobiography, Head On. Have you read that?
No, apparently it's great.
I've read it so many times in my life. It's
really
entertaining to me, yeah. Recommend that one, yeah.
Okay. Favourite TV show? It could be an old one, new one, TV series, Netflix, whatever you want. Okay.
Oh, recently, I loved Chernobyl. I thought that was incredible.
Brilliant.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, wasn't it? Yeah. We're just watching myself and my wife are watching The Terror at the moment. Have you heard about that one?
No. Is that good?
It's extraordinary. Yeah, it's got Jared Harris in it again. It's the same guy that was in Chernobyl. Recommend that. Probably favorite TV show of all time. The Prisoner is a classic. Love that.
Yeah. Have you been to Port Merion?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
You need to get. I'm a member of the Prisoners Society.
Are you?
Yes, and I've been given an honorary cape.
Wow.
Yes, number 17. And there's loads of famous kind of rock artists. I'm gonna nominate you for one of the capes.
Oh, please do. Yeah.
I'm gonna do that.
I have made the pilgrimage. I need to take my wife there too. Yeah.
I mean, there's loads of everybody's got number one, number whatever, and it's just a little publicity thing they do, and it's good for Port Merion as well. I love that place. I mean, have you been to their festival number 6?
No, I only went to the actual place itself once many years ago.
Right.
What is the festival?
Oh, it was a big rock festival. I think it's finished now, but rock and culture. It's kind of like half literary festival, half rock. And it was amazing. I did a big 3D soundtrack to a film, Under Milk Woods, that came out at the time. And so we had 3,000 people listening to a 3D soundtrack, which is yeah. Your favourite other producer?
Oh, favourite other producer. Well, I grew up listening. I was so inspired by what Trevor Horn was doing in the early 80s.
Me too.
Yeah, I mean, that just blew my mind. So let's say Trevor.
Yeah. Slave to the Rhythm made me want to give up pretty.
Yeah, Slave to the Propaganda album. I know that was Steve Lipson, but
yeah,
Dr. Mabuse was Trevor, and Frankie, all those Frankie 12 inches, the Seals first rank,
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. Everything. I've got to get him on the podcast, actually.
Hearts of Noise, you should, yeah.
He's an old friend. Other musical artist or composer?
I'm really a massive fan at the moment of this guy called Max Richter. Do you know Max Richter?
Yeah, the Sleep.
Genius. So, yeah, but just his melody.
And everything else he does, yeah.
Yeah, everything. Yeah, basically everything else he does, yeah. The Sleep thing is amazing, but he's put out an album in the last 12 months called Voices, which I'm totally addicted to as well.
Right, I'll have a listen to.
I just think he's a genius. I love that idea of someone that's like essentially a classical musician, but you can tell they've also grown up listening to things like Aphex Twin and Radiohead, and it's all in there too, or Heaven 17.
Hopefully.
You can kind of hear it's all in there. I love that about him. And there's that whole generation, people like Nils Frahm as well. And
Nils Frahm, yeah, fantastic. Your own favorite song of your own?
Well, I'm very partial to the new record, and I think the one I would not necessarily my favorite of all things I've done, but the one I'm most proud of right now, which is a slightly different thing, is King Ghost, because it's entirely electronic.
Yeah, I really like it.
And for me, that is a big watershed moment. To have made something with no guitars, no real drums, purely electronic is quite a big thing for me. And for it to have come out so well and to be still quite emotionally affecting as well as a song, it's something that's made me very proud of it.
Can I encourage you to continue on the path that you've just taken?
You don't need to. I'm already.
I really, really like it. I can't wait for your next output. Okay. Visual or conceptual artist?
Visual or conceptual artist? Well, I'm not sure this is exactly what you mean. Are you talking more about in the realms of, serious
art world? Yeah.
The art world. Okay.
Because I'd allow you, say, stage designers or something.
Well, I tell you, the person that immediately popped into my head was Chris Cunningham, the video maker. Do you know Chris Cunningham?
I do. He's a mate of mine.
You're joking me.
No.
What's he been doing for the last 10 years?
Oh, he's fucking lost his mind. He's decided he's turning into a fucking... He wants to be a rock god, and, And
he's a genius.
He's been... his film's just incredible. His video making, incredible.
I mean, I was showing them to my wife recently, that Come to Daddy, and the Window Licker, and then the Bjork one, and then the Monkey Drummer. Have you seen the Monkey Drummer?
Yeah.
I mean, just and Robert Johnny.
Listen, he wants to be a rock star, and he's been living the dream.
In what way has he been living the dream?
He's been touring with his
parents.
Yeah,
I didn't even know he had a band.
Yeah, well, he did. Look it up. It's his band.
I mean,
apparently it's not. Oh, I better not say this. Anyway, moving on.
Okay.
No, I just remind you, I want to get him on the podcast because I want to get graphic designers and all kinds of.
I would love to talk to him. I mean, honestly, every time people ask me, record company ask me, what sort of video do you want to make? I said, well, do you know this guy Chris Cunningham? Does he still make videos? And they're like, no, we've not heard from him in years. I just thought his videos were just I mean, the one he did for Square Pusher as well, the Come to Daddy one.
Yeah. When I talked to him, the last time I talked to him was about 3 or 4 years ago. And he just told me that he'd just turned down a big feature film, animated feature film, because he said, I want complete artistic control, and they wouldn't give it to him. It was a Hollywood film.
Right. I love that. I love that about him already.
Yeah.
I love that about him.
I mean, literally turned down millions of pounds.
I love that.
And
I also would like to see him do more stuff. So in a way, I don't love that, but
yeah,
I love.
You know what I mean?
There's a fantastic sorry to interrupt, but there's a fantastic story about Aphex Twin, apparently Richard D. James, who apparently Madonna kept ringing him up and leaving messages on his answering phone saying she wanted to work with him and she wanted to produce him. And eventually the guy from his record company apparently got hold of him and said, Richard, have you not been getting these messages from Madonna? She's desperate to work with you. I said, oh yeah, I've been getting her messages, but she's shit, isn't she? And I just love that. These people that they're so not career motivated. You know what I mean? It's like the complete antithesis of career motivated. You know, and Chris Cunningham sounds like he's one of those guys. He just doesn't give a fuck. He
literally doesn't give a fuck. He just does what he wants to do.
And I love that. It
might bite him in the arse though, because you can't live on fresh air, can you?
Well, there is that. Yeah.
Finally, two to go. A moment in your life that really was an epiphanal moment. You know, some moment of realization or an event that happened to you that changed your life forever. So it can be positive or negative, whatever you want.
Oh, what a good question. An epiphanal moment.
Some moment of realization, perhaps.
Can I come back to that one in a minute, Mark?
Yeah. Okay.
I don't want to rush into an answer there. That's
yeah. Okay, this is easier, I hope.
Yeah.
Favorite synth.
Favorite synth, Prophet 5.
I have to tell you.
Yeah.
I've done
Prophet 5.
15 or 16 of these. I've asked the same question to everyone, and they've all come up with a different answer. So it's really interesting.
Well, that's a thing. Yeah, it does.
Synths have you have a certain affinity for a certain synth. It's just about the way the faders and the knobs are laid out, or the color of it, or the sound it produces. And I mean, mine is obviously for Roland equipment generally, but yeah. Anyway, good. And epiphanal moment.
Right. Well, I'm thinking about this. Is a hard one.
It can be one of, and it doesn't have to be the definitive.
Okay. I mean, there have been incredible moments in my career when I kind of realized to myself, you know what, you did okay. And I think that moment for me in recent history was doing 3 nights at the Royal Albert Hall as a solo artist, and just thinking to myself, okay, most people have still never heard of me. I'm not a mainstream artist. I failed in my mission to become Prince. or whatever.
You've got to be able to dance, mate. You know.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I was a bit naive there. All right, I failed in my mission to become Jeff Lynne or Roberts or whatever it was. But you know what? I've done okay.
That's no fucking joke. Let me tell you, selling out Royal Albert Hall for 3 nights.
That was a great moment, and I acknowledged to myself at that moment that I'd done okay, and it wasn't exactly where I'd intended to arrive at, but you never really arrive at the point you think you're going to arrive at anyway when you set out on the journey, do you?
No. I've never had a game plan in my life. It's just all evolved. Has it gone to your head?
No, because I think that's the good thing about these things happening in later life. If that had happened to me when I was 25. Yeah. I'm sure I would have become a complete dick. I'm sure, because I'm already a bit of a control freak. So, but it happened to me when I was like 50.
How old are you?
I'm 53 now.
Oh my God! For the listeners, he looks about 35, max.
Very flattering, thank you. But I may look 50, I may look 35, but I certainly feel 53. So. So it happened to me. It happened to me after I've been in the business for the best part of 30 years. And like I say, there've been a lot of frustrations along the way. There is in every career, I know that. But standing on stage at the Royal Albert Hall, looking up, seeing my mum in the audience, seeing my family in the audience, those things, it sounds cheesy, but those things matter, really.
Easy at all. It's real. That's
real. Yeah. That was definitely a real epiphanal moment.
Well, I think it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. We have much more to talk about offline, I think. But Simon was right. That's all I can say.
Simon is always right. Simon's always right.
He is the puppet master.
He really is. Yeah, bless him. What a great geezer.
Wait till he hears.
You have to get him on one day.
He's already interviewed me.
He's interviewed you. Right.
Yeah.
Fantastic. You should get to him though about his life, because he's had. Has he told you much about his history?
Yeah.
It's
quite deep.
It's harrowing. Yeah. And what a lovely guy he's come out the other end as, though.
And he's got a lovely family, and God bless him.
Yeah.
He's gonna love this. Yeah. What a pleasure, Stephen. We will get to meet in the flesh soon. As soon as I suppose after Easter, innit? When the lockdown is a bit more.
I'll drop you a line. I'm happy to come down.
Yeah, I'd love you to come down and hear our system and the stuff we've been doing. And there's some synergy. We could possibly work together on something together.
Possibly so. I was going to ask you, actually, I remixed Roxy's first album in 5.1.
Fuck off.
Yeah, and Virginia Plain and the B-side.
Oh, no. Pajama Armor.
No, not Pajama Armor. It was called The Numberer.
I know The Numberer, yeah.
It was an instrumental written by Annie McKay. I did that in 5.1 a couple of years ago. Do you want me to send it down to you?
Yes, please.
Can you play just interleaved 5.1?
Yeah, I've got all the decoding stuff.
Because when you said you're a Roxy fan, I thought, that's something you're going to.
I would love to hear it. I'm not sure we can actually. Do I have the decoder anymore? Because you have to pay for that shit, don't you?
I don't know. Or when I come down to see you, I'll bring a Blu-ray down, or whatever.
Send me the file. I'm pretty sure I can decode it. I'm pretty sure I can. Fantastic, mate. I can't wait to meet you. Let's do it. You're frozen. Typical. Right at the end. You're frozen. You're back. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I lost you there again. Yeah,
I'm just going to say goodbye then before it freezes again. And we'll see you very soon. Thanks a lot, Stephen.
Fantastic, mate. Cheers, buddy.
Everybody, go and buy that fucking album or whatever you do.
Exactly. Buy that fucking album. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye, mate.
Bye.
Bye now.